30 minutes time and stuff.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll try
hey
to save it as
everyone.
well.
We are live. We now have a fantastic guest on another live stream with Shobi. For those of you that don't know what Shobi is an assessment and feedback platform that provides personalized and rich feedback to students by teachers and vice versa as well. And the session is not really about Shobi today. Today is very much about our esteemed guest, Dr. Bill Rankin, joining us all the way from Virginia. And I'm based in the UK. My name's Abdul Chohan. And welcome to the show, Bill.
Thanks so much. It's really great to be here. And I'm excited to spend some time thinking about designing learning experiences and thinking about the ways, especially that feedback between teachers and learners and that kind of community of kind of based around their work can grow. So I'm going to put up a little presentation. I'll talk you through it, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end. You and I can chat. Would that be all right?
I'd love to hear that. I mean, just for context, like Bill and I have kind of traveled together for events and stuff. I first came across Bill's work at Aberdeen Christian University with mobile devices many years ago. And I remember when I was looking at a similar project here in the UK, that was the only other organization in the world that I'd come across that had done something to that scale. But we'll speak about that later on because Bill is full of amazing ideas and approaches to learning. So I really want to kind of give Bill a ton of time to be able to explain, the things that he's working on at the moment, the thoughts that he's made. Bill, fire away. Share with us.
All right, thanks very much. I will. So we're thinking about a lot of things here, and I want to take a step back and think about learning especially, and some of the things that research has shown us about learning and the way learning works, because I think that's going to drive us towards building a different kind of environment in classrooms and in learning environments. So we're going to start with considering learning itself and thinking about it. This is a really old book. It's been around for a long time. It was done by the U.S. National Research Council a number of years ago, Bransford, Brown, and Cocking. And they did a lot of research. It's a very well-researched and supported book. And one of the things they discovered was this, that students come to the classroom with preconceptions about how the world works. If their initial understanding is not engaged, they may fail to grasp the new concepts and information that are taught, or they can learn them for the purposes of a test, but revert to their preconceptions outside the classroom. This is really important because it turns out that just telling people stuff, just giving them information, may not actually overcome those preconceptions. And the best example of that is there's a fellow called Muller, who a number of years ago did a PhD at University of Sydney and now runs this wonderful podcast called Veritasium, which you absolutely should look up. He's got a bunch of episodes on YouTube. What he was studying was the impact of Khan Academy videos. And so, so he showed these videos to some people. First of all, did a kind of basic test of their understanding of basic physics principles. And then he showed half of that cohort these videos. But before having them then retake the test on their understanding of physics, he asked them how they felt about it. Oh, it was really helpful. It was really clear. We really liked the videos. We found them very useful. And then he gave them a post-test. Now, on the pre-test, they had scored 6 out of 22. On the post-test, they scored 6.2, almost no change whatsoever. And what he said, what his research showed was this, that students have existing ideas about scientific phenomena. Is just what Bransford, Brown, and Cocking said. If the video presents scientific concepts in a clear, well-illustrated way, students believe they are learning, but, oh dear, I can't seem to get they do not engage with the media on a deep enough level to realize that what was presented differs from their prior knowledge. And they went through a series of steps. They thought they knew it already, so they didn't pay utmost attention. So they didn't recognize that what was presented differed from what they were already thinking, so that they didn't actually learn. But here's the cherry on top. They got more confident in the incorrect ideas they were thinking before. So what Muller did was he created some new videos that looked just like the Khan Academy videos, that started out just the same, but in the middle slammed people into a problem that they couldn't figure out. And so he asked them how they felt about these videos. I didn't like it. It was confusing. It was annoying. I didn't understand what was going on. But when those people took the post-test, they scored 12 out of 22. So colliding with challenges and finding a way for learners to collide with those challenges can really help with the learning. We don't take in knowledge until we collide and have to recalibrate our understanding. So having a space in which teachers and learners in which teachers can expose learners to those collisions, but then in which learners can talk to teachers about that recalibration, that's something really powerful. And so those lines of communication in a tool like Shobi, for example, is a really great way to help people start to take in that learning in a more effective way.
Yeah.
The second, that's really, it's counterintuitive. We think if we just show the thing, people will know about it, but often that's not the case. The second example I want to give is recent research by these two researchers at University of Chicago, Cardis and O'Brien. And they also showed people a bunch of videos, and they were talking about the power of these videos. They showed people the same videos kind of over and over again about some different things. This is such a fun paper to read. Even if you're not kind of a research person, this is a fun paper. So like it was, magicians pulling, tablecloths out from under a fully set table, or juggling things, or all kinds of stuff like that. And what they were looking at was, how well do people get information? They felt in watching this that they could really do this, but the more they watched without practicing themselves, the more they nonetheless believed that they could perform the skill too. However, their actual abilities did not improve after merely watching others, despite their own predictions to the contrary. And that gap sometimes led people to assume that they had learned more from merely watching than they would have done. And it fostered this illusion of skill acquisition. The problem is, you can watch Bob Ross paint happy little trees all day long, and you can feel like, I could do that. And Bob is so affirming and friendly and nice. And you think, I could absolutely paint that way. But when you try, it can be really hard. And the problem is that the challenge is that if you feel like you could do it and then it doesn't turn out, you can get really discouraged. Now, one of the things that they showed people, they showed a video of someone just juggling a single bowling pin, tossing it up into the air, it spins, and they catch it. And so they had people watch these videos, and they asked them how they felt. Do you feel like you could do this? 3 was, yes, absolutely. I could do that. And so all these groups were pretty much the same. And the third group was the highest. They had the highest, rating. I think I can absolutely do that. They gave some people an explanation. All right, here's the process. You're going to take the bowling pin, you're going to hold it in this way, you're going to toss it, you're going to release it at this point. Lots of explanations about it. And those people, yeah, I could do this. Some people, they gave a lot of technical information. Here's how much the bowling pin weighs, here's how long it is, here's how wide it is, all this information. And those people thought, yeah, I could do it. But the last cohort, they had them just hold it for 1 minute. And just holding it, those people said, I think this may be harder than it looks. When people can experience something with their learning, when they can get more than just information, but when they can experience it, and when they can demonstrate that experience, so they can show you them doing something, then they tend to learn a lot more. The last example has to do with this guy called Tom Skoka. Now, he's an internet writer, and he's done a bunch of things. And one of the things he encountered, he enjoys cooking. And one of the things he encountered was that he kept running across the need to caramelize onions. And he looked it up on the web, and the web told him over and over again, it takes about 5 minutes. Well, that didn't seem right. And every time he tried to caramelize onions in 5 minutes, it did not work. So he decided to do a comprehensive study of caramelizing onions. And what he found was it absolutely does not work in 5 minutes, because either you turn the heat up really high and they just blacken and char, or you turn the heat where they would caramelize, but in 5 minutes they won't do it. No less an authority than Julia Child said about 40 minutes. But the internet kept saying 5 minutes, and the more it said 5 minutes, the more the algorithm said 5 minutes is the answer, and the more it said that was the answer, the more that got taken seriously. So he wrote an article, a sort of, all right, here's the way it really works. And what he said was 5 minutes is absolutely wrong. Now, he started his article with some quotes from a few of the websites that said 5 minutes. And when Google scraped that algorithm, it said, Tom Skokas says you can caramelize onions in 5 minutes. And he became part of that answer. And what he had to write this whole article saying, I don't believe this. I tried it. It doesn't work. You need to try it for yourself. Just because you read it somewhere doesn't mean it works. So the last piece of learning advice, the key here is that we don't know what's real until we try things and apply them. And if we have a tool that lets us encounter something, that lets us collide with it, that lets us experience it, and that lets us demonstrate, then we've got something really, really powerful. If we're in the business of helping learners know, then we have to face a couple things. Knowing about a thing is not the same as knowing. And that means learning about a thing is not the same as knowing. And that means learning about a thing is not really the same as learning. So fundamentally, we have to design something better. Now, I've been working on this problem for a while, and I've been thinking about the kinds of environments that that classroom culture set up. And what we see a lot is this kind of standardized recipe process in a lot of classrooms. The teacher says, all right, I want you to complete this exercise. And so there is an assignment and there are expected results. And the truth of the matter is some people are going to make those results just fine. Some people are not going to quite get there. Some people could have gotten much further, but they stop because that's where you're supposed to stop. And because there's this kind of problem that people who are on the outside, they become underachievers on the one side and troublemakers on the other side. So what you get in this classroom is a rigid discourse community that alienates people who are not exactly the same. And we've probably all seen this in some classroom, either we were in, or maybe even a classroom we've taught, where what you're really doing is the assignment, the standardization of the assignment requires a standardization of the learner. So we're not adapting the assignments to the learners, we're adapting the learners to the assignments. And if you can't fit in that narrow category, you don't belong. And we sometimes see children drop out of school, for example, if they're in those outlier groups. On either side, they feel like school doesn't have anything to offer me, or I don't have anything to offer school. So, and the key is, the problem, the challenge of that is, it often is about us expecting every product to come out the same. So we're going to do this assignment, and if your bookshelf doesn't look like every other bookshelf, then you just don't belong. But there's got to be a different way. And again, having a flexible tool, or a tool that teachers can use in lots of different ways, can help us uncover something better. But of course, there's another problem. I mean, well, let me talk about the problems with that standardized process in general. The first is it tends to focus on or emphasize mimicry over innovation, obedience and conformity over creativity, a focus on authority over collaboration and community. In fact, you're not allowed usually to talk with the other learners in the classroom or to get help. It's you or nothing. And if you can't do that project, you don't belong. That standardization and abstraction is much, as I said, it's emphasized over personalization and application. We do these projects in the classroom because that's the only thing we can do in the classroom, and everyone has to conform themselves to that. And finally, this shunning of outliers, this in-group versus out-group thing. So what a lot of people say is, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll fix that then by just having people make something creative. Here's a box of stuff, just make something creative, which is kind of terrifying because that's no real assignment. Like, I don't know what to do with that stuff, especially if I have no experience with it before, if I'm a novice learner. And so you get a bunch of possible proposals in that classroom, and, you know, some people exceed things and some people kind of go backwards. Their vision doesn't quite match the product that they produce at the end. And what you've got here is not a cohort of students who can help one another, of learners who can help one another. What you've got is these kind of fragmented discourse communities. Well, we made a birdhouse that tells you what kind of birds are coming to the, you know, to the feeder or to the house. And we made this really fun game. And we made, you know, something that's about, you know, harvesting plastics in the ocean. Well, those are all great projects, but how do I talk in my class with that? And as a teacher, how do I support all those vastly different approaches? You know, it's really hard for me to have enough attention to give to all those learners. So what you get with this kind of creative focus is another set of challenges. There's this great emphasis on creativity, but the community of the classroom kind of falls apart into this chaotic energy. We get a lot of independence and personalization, but again, it's really hard for people to collaborate and help one another out. And that means all the pressure is on the teacher rather than on the learning community in the classroom. There's this focus on output and application, but as a teacher, I can't support all of that. So it's very hard for me to scaffold that learning. I have to become an expert in all kinds of things. That's really hard. There's a lot of variation and novelty, but how do I compare those projects? One is really, you know, maybe really ambitious and one is not so much. So if the ambitious one fails, is that, I mean, but the ones that's not so ambitious succeeds? I don't know. How do I judge that? It's really difficult. And again, you get this kind of shunning of outliers, because since people are on their own, sort of, if they've got some kind of access to resources, skills, experience, material resources, parents who know how to do things, they can succeed in ways that learners who don't have those resources can't. And so those learners look like they're not as good. So there's got to be another way. And as I was thinking about this and kind of working on learning design, one of the things I recognized was there's this one feature, and if you have that, your learning suddenly shifts. Now, I don't know if you know about this, but there was one big argument when the original engineers were working on the Macintosh. There was this feature that some of the people said, you have to include this. And there were others who said, we don't have the space, we don't have the time for that. There's limited resources, we can't do it. And the first group said, look, if you don't do this, people are never going to use this new machine. People were used to machines that weren't graphical, and they weren't used to computers that work like this. So this group said, we've got to have this feature or no one is going to try something new. And that feature was undo. The undo feature was this guy, Bill Atkinson, who was one of the original designers of the Mac, said, if people try something out and it doesn't work and they can undo so that they haven't lost everything, they'll be experimental. They'll try stuff. So undo is a huge, important thing. So this last strategy, which is kind of a combination of the two and creates I think, a much more productive learning culture, thinks about the importance of undo. And it's going to start with a platform. And the platform is just a let's start here, but we're not going to finish here. We're just going to start here. And so there's once again a platform. We're all going to make this thing. And yeah, it's all going to look the same. So, but the thing is, getting to this point is not the test. So if you need help from other people or help from the web or help from me as the teacher or from your fellow learners, no problem. We just want everyone to get to this platform stage. We don't care how you get there, because the platform is about familiarizing yourself with the basics. It's not the test yet. It's not the important thing yet. And then what we want you to do is tinker with that. And tinkering is just changing stuff that's already there. What happens if you make those positive numbers in the code negative numbers, for example? Or what happens if you move that support out towards the edge? Or what happens if you use a different transition between those two cuts of video? What does it do? And as you mess with those and wrestle with those, you're forming what Piaget called these mental models, right? That these ideas about how the world works. When everyone starts from the same platform and then tinkers, you get diversity, but not as much yet. And what happens is, what we've seen as we've done this in classrooms and in learning situations kind of around, is that you get this shared community where everybody has the same foundation, but they've built on that foundation a little bit differently, so they can help each other out. For example, when we've done this with coding in Scratch, for example. My wife B is a teacher, and she's used this a lot. And so one of the things she's done with her students is she starts with a very basic paddle and ball game, and it just has the paddle and ball coded and nothing else. And then she has them start tinkering with how it works and with the gameplay. And some people are going to add sounds, and some people are going to add backgrounds and video effects, and some people are going to make the gameplay more challenging. But they can each go out on their own branch. They can explore what's meaningful to them, but they can also share it with each other. So, hey, I'll trade you how we did this, this great background for some of your sound effects, because they're really cool. And so because people can share, they start to really build this supportive community in the classroom. So let's see. I'm going to move this over here. For some reason, I'm not progressing as I would like somehow. All right, let's see if, there we go. So this is an emphasis on, I'm not getting my slides to progress. There's an emphasis on collaboration and community in that classroom. The projects begin to adapt themselves and conform to the learners rather than requiring the learners to conform to themselves. So as I tinker, I start to change things. There's a focus on scaffolding and support with undoability, because we're all getting to that basic platform. If I try something out and it doesn't work, I can just undo back to that platform and then try a new direction. And because everyone knows how to get to that platform and how that platform works, I've got this basis that I can start from. We get a lot of variation, but it's built on a standard to allow comparability. And then there's a valuing of outliers. The more crazy things people do, the more they're valuable to the community. Hey, you did this really cool thing that's very different from the thing that I focused on. And so those specializations start to be a way to reinforce the overall community output. Everyone can work together and share, but we value that diversity. And so this method that we've been working on, we call FTMS, follow, tinker, make, and share. So follow starts with direct instruction. A teacher says, here's how you do it. And this is as much about helping teachers learn to let go and trust learners as well. So the learners are scaffolded, but the teachers are as well. At the next phase, at tinker, it's guided practice. So I start asking questions maybe as a teacher rather than giving directions, and I'm letting the learners explore and test and try stuff out. And again, they're not having to make anything new here. They're just messing with what already exists. Once they've developed the ideas about how all that works, now they're ready to make for independent practice. And that performance assessment is really based on how they do out in the world or in this real problem or solving this challenge that they've chosen themselves. But we bring it all back at the end, especially for three kinds of things. For comparison, let's look at yours and mine and see how they're similar and different. For coordination and collaboration, we might take the best features of both of these projects and put them together, or we might, move these two projects so that they're associated with one another because that's going to let us address a bigger challenge. Or the last thing is competition. So let's see which one is most fun to play, or let's see which one is the best use of resources. So if we think about how those look, at the follow phase, everyone's going to make the same thing, assemble the video in the same way, or copy this code, or mix these chemicals together. At tinker, we're going to try to change a few things. At make, we're going to build our own stuff. And then at share, again, we're going to compete and collaborate and compare. So it looks sort of like this. At that follow phase, everyone's stuff looks the same. At tinker, you're going to start to see some variation. At make, people make all kinds of crazy things. And then at share, we bring those things together to see how they fit. And the great thing is you can take something from the make phase or the share phase and bring it back and have everyone build it. And now let's iterate on that. Let's tinker with that and see if we can get that to do more. So it's really about this kind of iteration and this process of building, and having a tool that lets people share and communicate and show each other stuff and comment on each other's stuff. Something like Shobi, for example, is so important then. So we start with imitation, then variation, combination, transformation, and creation, and finally comparison, collaboration, and competition. So very quickly, building a platform requires a footprint with some foundational concepts and skills, a kind of minimum viable product, a basic structure that can be reverted to if tinkering doesn't work out, so that there's undoability, diverse ways for learners to interact and tinker, room for building new things, additional structures, and finally, support inside and outside the learning environment, including the space for conversation and reflection and input and feedback, which is where a tool like Shobi really shines, because it lets all these directions kind of come back and forth. And really what we're doing here is we're fulfilling what's called the Dikw Pyramid. Data put into structures and frameworks and algorithms becomes information, information put into uses and practices and context becomes knowledge, and knowledge enculturated becomes wisdom. And that's where we want to move students. We're not just focusing here on the content, but also the context and communities around that. Because if we just focus on the content, we're really teaching learners to do the things machines can do. That's what they're best at, information and data. But we want to humanize people by moving them into those last two directions. So that's all I have to say about that.
Wow. That was kind of like a real whirlwind, Bill. Like, as always, kind of sitting there and just absorbing all of that information. So a couple of questions, and we've got very little time left. Number one, has this been have you seen this in practice? Have you been able, I know it's been COVID and all of that. Tell us any examples. Tell us what you've seen where this kind of kicks in somewhere.
We've used it in lots of different places. So I mentioned my wife has used this. She's used it to teach Final Cut Pro and iMovie, and she's used it to do coding. So, the way you put together a video is actually, if you start with a formula, then you can start tweaking that formula. Yeah. I've used it actually for a variety of things. I've used it to teach some robotics and the use of kind of programming in Python. And then I've also used it for professional development with teachers, actually. So let's start with a basic assignment. Let's all build that assignment. Now let's start tweaking it and messing with it. Wow. But again, what you've got to have is it all falls apart without communication and without that kind of robust back end that lets people talk to each other and comment on each other's stuff and see what everybody is up to, and asynchronously as well as synchronously, because so much of it happens as you're kind of thinking and working. So again, a tool like Shobi, for example, is really helpful with that, because I can put up evidence of my work and I can ask people to kind of comment on that, intervene, and we can do so much sharing.
I think like Shobi is primarily it's kind of hybrid nature. The fact that children, when we've certainly seen this on my travels, where the learning can continue outside school hours, on weekends, in the evening, conversations carry on. You're inspired by something that you've just walked down the street, you've taken a picture, uploaded it, shared it with your community, and it's that thing, right? You can't legislate for when good ideas are going to happen. They happen when they happen. So the ability to capture that and share it at that moment in time is actually quite a powerful thing, you know. And I would be,
Absolutely.
you know, and I think there's so many good ideas that sometimes just lost because people couldn't remember it again, or it just came to me at that moment and it's gone, and so on. So
Capturing the moment of
absolutely,
inspiration, capturing that moment of inspiration is so powerful. And especially because, again, if you think about those 3 learning things I talked about at the beginning,
yeah,
when I
yeah,
collide with that, you know, suddenly I get that that's how that works. That's
yeah,
the time that the learning can really take place. And if a learner can capture that and put that information up, and a teacher can then say, yes, or let's think about this now, then that moment is not lost. But if I have
yeah,
to wait till the next time I get in the classroom,
yeah,
oh,
yeah. And I think
I was thinking
that's
this day.
absolutely key. Bill, look, that kind of 30 minutes has literally just flown by. But let me ask you this. So anybody that's watching this, obviously this is live at the moment. It will then be available on Twitter and other places as well. Where can they go to find out more about what you've been speaking about? Is it the web? Is it
The
unfoldinglearning.net?
Yeah, you can go to unfoldlearning.net, and a lot of it points now also to there's a bunch of articles that kind of go through this in more detail on Medium. And so if people want to find out about that, the links actually go through unfoldlearning.net. So that's a place you can go and you can see weird things that I've been thinking about for a long time. But there are also articles by B, who I mentioned a few times. She's written some things there. And there are links then to those Medium articles that talk this out in a little more detail.
Wonderful, wonderful. I am sure this won't be the last time that we will speak on here on this. I know we're always chatting and sharing ideas and so on. But I'd love to kind of have you on again at some point in the future and talk more about whatever your thoughts are at that moment in time as well. Bill, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today. Really, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Abdul. It's been a great pleasure.